We start this story seeing an elf waking up and saying good morning to someone named Xenos, telling him it's time to get up and then going to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. A few minutes later, Xenos finally gets up, returns the good morning to the elf, calling her Lily, and sits down to drink his black tea. At that moment, Lily shares a thought with us, saying that a healer is third-rate if they only heal injuries, second-class if they heal and comfort, and first-class healers make the world a better place. She mentions that the history of this kingdom, known as Herseth, is closely linked to healers, as they greatly helped develop this nation, achieving a very important position in this society. The hospital is where healers gather to learn sophisticated healing magic and obtain their license before they actually begin their journeys as healers. However, in a corner of the kingdom, there's someone who hasn't received formal education and also doesn't have a license to practice healing. And guess who, folks? Yes, it's our brother Xenos, who is currently treating a patient and upon finishing receives a modest payment for his service. As the patient leaves, Lily reminds him that today he has a home visit, and the doctor informs her that he should only return in the evening. Because of this, the elf promises to prepare dinner while the human is out. The scene then changes, and we see Lily lighting the fire and preparing the meal until Carmilla smells the food and comes to see what's being prepared, mentioning that the girl's cooking always makes her anxious. The happy elf simply replies that she's training to be Xenos' wife one day, and Carmilla, seeing all this excitement, says she'll rest in her room for a while and flies off to take a nap. At this moment, a woman named Zofia enters the residence looking for the doctor. Lily informs her that he went out for a home visit, and since she has no choice, Zofia says she will wait for him, mentioning that she hoped to have that handsome young man all to herself if she arrived early, but luck isn't always on our side. Then a cat woman named Linga enters, also looking for Xenos, and I'm already thinking that the entire female population of the city is at the guy's house, but we move on. Lily, seeing Linga, gives the same warning, saying that the doctor isn't there. Linga then laments not being able to completely lick Mr. Xenos while receiving a caress on her tail. Zofia informs her that she arrived first and suggests she go home, and as a consequence, the two begin a duel of sinister stares until Lily joins the competition. And if you think it's over, hold on, we have more. Because at this moment, another woman, very much in the Faith in the Crazy Ones style, arrives, smashing the door. Her name is Lowe, and Lily once again informs her that the man is on a home visit, also letting her know that the other patients are already in the back and that she will only come in if she fixes the door. When the whole group gathers, Lowe deduces that they came for Lily's food, but Zofia replies that she was probably the only one who came for that. Speaking of the elf, we see her busy preparing dinner at this moment, including the supposed secret ingredient in the meal. After doing so, she invites the girls to eat there when Xenos returns, and Lowe makes it clear that was the idea. Zofia accepts since she's already there, and Linga mentions that she'll also eat a big plate, and Lily says she's looking forward to a group meal and then retires to put away the washed laundry. Zofia confesses that the smell of the food is killing her, and Linga can't hold out until dinner, so she and Loewe go to the pot to get the food. Upon tasting it, the big woman and the cat woman mention that the taste of that food is incredible, and completely losing control, they attack the pot as if there were no tomorrow. Zofia warns that Lily won't like this at all, but upon smelling it better, she decides to try it too. Meanwhile, poor Lily was calmly doing her chores in the company of animals and nature, and this harmony brought her the peace she needed to lie on the grass and breathe for a moment. She has no idea of the frustration that awaits her. Back in the kitchen, we see that the group gorge themselves without mercy, and as the wise Homer Simpson would say, at times like these, it's my fault and I'll blame whoever I want. So Linga starts by blaming the other two, and Lowe just repeats her strategy. Zofia questions if the two are suffering from amnesia, and the Catwoman agrees that it's a good idea to pretend they don't remember anything. Lowe suggests they prepare more food, and Zofia thinks it's a good idea, but unfortunately it was already too late as Lily arrives and politely asks what the hell happened. At this, the three then sit at the table and each tries to explain, but in reality they're just stalling, and Lily, starting to run out of patience, just slaps the table and repeats her question. Zofia then spills the beans and reveals that the smell was irresistible, and she decided to try some of the food. Linga in turn says her hands moved on their own, while Lowe admits the food was very good. Seeing that the elf is getting annoyed, the three quickly gather and conclude that the little one is really upset. Congratulations, Captain Obvious. They then continue talking about a bunch of irrelevant things for the plot until Zofia herself gets tired and comments that the other two are losing focus of the conversation. And when I thought something would develop, they just keep fighting among themselves, exchanging various barbs. Lily then calls the attention of the negative IQ crowd in front of her and makes it clear that Xenos will be upset if they fight, and that all she wanted was to have a meal with her friends. Facing the moving outburst, Zofia bows her head and apologizes, while Linga does the same and promises to help with another dinner, as does Lowe. Anyway, the elf regrets that there are no more ingredients to make another meal. Hearing this, another figure intervenes to question what was just said, as it's certainly a problem. Linga gets scared and kneels before Carmilla, the ghostly creature who was eager to eat Lily's food and just found out it's not happening. Because of this, she mentions that perhaps it would be a great idea to make another stew, but this time a stew filled with souls to make it more flavorful. Facing such a threat, the other two culprits also kneel before Carmilla, but Lily thinks that heads don't need to roll. It will just be necessary to have more ingredients, and the three, feeling their hides were saved, think this is a great idea, and decide to go after the ingredients. Carmilla then asks if Lily shouldn't be more upset with them, but the elf confesses that she's fine. Carmilla, in turn, mentions that they wouldn't have the same luck if they had touched her drinks with their dirty fingers. The elf then replies that she acts calmer because she's mature and likes it when everyone is together. And for her, the real problem is not knowing if she can prepare the food before Xenos returns. The scene then changes, and we see our protagonist walking through the city in the late afternoon until a girl passes him, visibly in pain, and a man with a malicious tone of voice appears behind her, questioning where she was. The girl says she went to the hospital because of a stomach ache but ended up not being treated due to lack of money. The man grabs her hair and makes it clear that having a stomach ache isn't enough for a slave to take a break, then violently takes her away. As the scene unfolds, the guy takes the girl to a graveyard and throws her onto an old dirty gravestone, saying he believes it's perfect for a filthy demi-human like her. In the midst of the commotion, a shadow emerges from the tomb and enters the woman. And without noticing, the guy kicks her in the stomach and leaves, saying she will only be fed if she shows results. When he turns his back, she gets up and claws the citizen's belly, tearing it open. As we glimpse the girl, we see that she is emanating a very powerful aura, probably thanks to the possession that happened earlier. The man then runs through a devastated part of the city, yelling for help until he reaches Xenos again. He reports that his servant went crazy and asks the young man for help, but Xenos just criticizes his self-centeredness, and at that moment she catches up to him. Xenos asks what he did, and he replies that he just did his usual work, something related to agriculture, and since he's very injured, he's willing to pay if the young man can do something about her. At this, the girl tries to attack the guy once more, and Xenos asks what happened to her that's putting her in such a bad mood. And she responds by just throwing rocks at our protagonist, and he manages to dodge all of them. Realizing that our protagonist has great skill, the citizen tries to order him to eliminate her, but Xenos refuses as his job is not to kill people. Outraged, the boar insists that an aristocrat like him couldn't die for something so insignificant, and that for him, everything is solved simply by buying another slave. Upon hearing this, Xenos is taken back to a traumatic memory where he is before many fallen people, and coming back to himself, he clarifies that his role is to save as many people as he can. At this moment, the girl throws a giant rock at the healer, but he wraps his fist with mana and smashes the rock into pieces, something that scares the noble and makes him question what kind of healer is capable of doing this. The woman moves quickly and the healer knows her speed is unusual even for her race, but regardless, with a magic shield, he repels an attack he suffers and throws the girl against a house, and the impact causes a wall to give way and fall on the aristocrat. After resolving the mess, Xenos goes to the demi-human and says he will help her up, asking her to calm down a bit. At this moment, she crawls and complains of pain, while the evil aura surrounding her manifests again, and then Xenos understands that she is possessed. After that, the girl bites him on one of his arms, and with the other, he then heals her, questioning what kind of agriculture causes people to be possessed by spirits, eliminating the ghost shortly after. As the scene evolves, the aristocrat, seeing that the healer restored the girl's broken leg in seconds, emerges from the rubble and says that this doctor is incredibly powerful. He then begs for help, but Xenos replies that his shift is over for today, then asks if he can see him tomorrow, but the noble explains that he will be dead by tomorrow and demands to be healed now. Zenos mentions that he wants additional payment, and the guy throws a bag with several gold coins, but this is far from what Zenos would like to receive. After all, he is an unlicensed underground healer, and saying this, he then asks to take the slave as compensation, and the citizen accepts the terms, and with that, Zenos heals him. Next, we see the girl wake up, and Zenos, beside her, shows her the paper saying he bought her and asks her name, and she replies that her name is Till. He then unceremoniously asks her to take off her clothes, as his purchase was expensive and he needs to know if she's in good condition. After hesitating for a moment, the girl does as she's told, and after evaluating her, Zenos discovers that she has gallstones which cause inflammation. Without wasting time, he completely heals her, and she doesn't understand how he was able to do it without any enchantment or magic circle. She then thanks him for this, but he would like her to also show service besides just thanking, and Till then says he can ask for whatever he wants, and with that, he then hands her a notebook and asks her to look for something. After some time, she leads him to the plant he was looking for, and he thanks her for it. She then asks if such a simple job as that served him, thinking there would be many other things involved, but he says her work is already done. She, understanding nothing, tries to explain that she is in his debt, but Zenos says she has already paid him back, mentioning that he always demands a fair price for the work he does, and pays a fair price for what he expects others to do. She tries to say she didn't do anything, but he explains that it's not quite like that, as she found the leaves he couldn't have found alone, which means her value was equal to what he had done for her, and thus their debts were settled. With that, our protagonist then tore up the servitude contract and informed her that she was now the owner of her own life. Radiant, Till acknowledged that she didn't know exactly what she wanted to do from now on, but that she would live to find out and would return to tell the doctor when she did. She then asks if she could return someday to see him again, and he confirmed yes, saying she could always count on him as an underground doctor, as long as she had some payment to offer, of course. At this, the scene changes, and after a chaotic day, the doctor returned home and was greeted by Lily, who promptly informed him that the food wasn't ready yet, and at that exact moment, the greedy ones arrived with the ingredients. Along with them, Carmilla also appeared and commented that Zenos seemed to have had so much fun that it was as if he had met a new girl. After teasing him, she disappeared, while Lily celebrated that they could make a lot of food with everything they had brought, and Zenos couldn't wait, while Lily promised to make black tea for everyone to drink together. After that, we have a flashback to our protagonist's story, where we see a man throw a gold coin to him, mentioning that it's something he might never have seen in his entire life, as it's not the kind of money a poor person would usually come across. The healer asks Aston what he means by this, and the arrogant lord, accompanied by a bunch of sycophants, reveals that they no longer need him. Zenos argues that he did a lot for them, and upon hearing this, everyone bursts into laughter. Aston mocks him, saying he's as foolish as he was when he was a child, adding that in reality anyone would have served in his place, as long as they were expendable and could conveniently serve as a human shield. According to the leader, the poor are basically livestock and that he as a poor animal is not part of the group. Zenos tries to argue that he was crucial in helping the team become strong, but the warrior brusquely dismisses him, not wanting the healer to claim any credit using the dark magic he learned on his own. At this crucial moment, their team must impress royalty and aristocracy, and having a has-been among them would only ruin their chances. In other words, the gold coin is nothing more than a farewell signal and a request for silence so that he never mentions being part of the Golden Phoenix group. Accepting the money, Zenos walks away, while we hear the gang's laughter mocking him. The scene changes, and if things were bad for our protagonist, they were worse for Lily, as we see she was a slave being assaulted by two thugs. At one point, the girl manages to break free from the man holding her and runs off, but he then shoots an arrow into her leg, causing her to collapse. Still fighting, she tries to defend herself and ends up biting his hand as he tries to grab her again. As a consequence, we see the rotten man there stabs her with his knife. While the struggle is happening, Zenos walks aimlessly, wondering what he will do with his life, until he hears someone screaming. Upon arriving, the female bandit scolds her companion for stabbing their precious merchandise. Seeing the child bleeding badly on the ground, Zenos immediately offers his gold coin to buy her. Since the elf was on the verge of dying anyway, the woman accepts the offer and leaves, satisfied that she at least made a profit. As soon as the attackers leave, the elf weakly asks if she's going to die, but our protagonist heals her in the blink of an eye. The healing was so fast that she didn't even feel it or understand what happened, but in any case, just the fact that she is alive and well makes her cry with joy. Zenos asks her name and she introduces herself as Lily, regretting that he had to spend his money on her. However, he reassures her, telling her not to feel guilty. He then introduces himself as an unlicensed underground healer, mentioning that he learned to do it on his own. When he asks Lily where she lives, he discovers that she doesn't even have a home, and the rumbling of her stomach reveals that she hasn't eaten in a while either. With this in mind, the healer decides that his first priority should be to get her new clothes and some food. They then go to a tavern for dinner and Lily devours the plate as if it were the best she had ever tasted. Delighted, she asks why he isn't eating too, but Zenos says he isn't hungry. However, the truth is that he's unfortunately broke. While Lily eats, he reflects on what he'll do with her next, thinking that perhaps placing her in an orphanage in the slums would be the sensible thing to do. But when he starts to imagine how she would be treated there, he quickly abandons that idea. Lily asks Zenos about where he works, and he says he just got kicked out of his group, leaving him with nowhere to go and that he will start looking for something to do. Just then, a man stumbles into the tavern, wounded and desperately begging for a glass of water. Zenos quickly notices the bullet wound and the burn mark on the man's arm, clearly the result of magical weaponry. The lizard man says he was shot by mistake and just wants the pain to go away. Seeing this, the healer stands up to offer help, but upon noticing the seriousness of the injury, decides to add an enchantment to ensure a safer recovery. He immediately performs the healing and the man recovers instantly. Disbelieving, the wounded man asks the healer's name, leading Lily to proudly announce her new friend's identity. Although unfamiliar with the name, the grateful man gives Zenos 4 gold coins as payment, happily leaving the tavern. However, Zenos remains strangely quiet, leading Lily to ask what's wrong. It then dawns on our protagonist that just as you pay restaurants for food, healers should also be compensated for their services. Remembering Lily's gratitude when he healed her and realizing that no one had ever thanked him that way before, he decides then to open a clinic to help those in need. It turns out that since he's from the hood, he obviously won't be able to get a license, which means he'll have to open a clandestine clinic and operate illegally. Lily, against all odds, thinks this is cool and offers to help in any way she can. Zenos questions that this whole thing is anything but cool, but oh well, you only live once. He then wonders if dragging a child into illegal business doesn't make the hole even deeper. But Lily gets annoyed and points out that she was bought by him and is happy to serve him, while our brother Zenos was just trying to help and didn't even intend to buy a slave. But since Lily has nowhere to go and abandoning her on the streets wouldn't do her any favors, Zenos decides to just go with it and commits to taking care of the girl until he can find a permanent home for her. Lily in turn promises to serve her master in every way, but Zenos gently asks her to avoid such compromising phrases. The scene changes and after leaving the tavern, both head to a dilapidated neighborhood where Zenos expresses his desire to establish his clinic amidst the ruins. Lily observes that the area doesn't seem conducive to starting a business, to which the man explains that this part of the city is abandoned, ideal for a discreet operation, as opening a clinic in the center would be imprudent. Searching for a minimally habitable residence, Zenos finally finds a home that, according to him, seems great, but to Lily and me, it looks more like a mansion worthy of a horror movie. The girl even tries to soften it by saying she acknowledges it's good to have a place to stay, but honestly, that place looked like a haunted mansion, and finding a wraith there wouldn't be pleasant at all. Confused, Zenos asks what she's talking about, leading Lily to clarify that wraiths are among the most powerful undead. They resemble people, but a simple touch is enough to drain someone's life, turning them into a vessel of despair and suffering. Eventually, the victim becomes a ghost forced to obey all their commands. In the next scene, our guy Zenos, who's not one for overthinking, is already opening the mansion door and entering, clearly demonstrating his little regard for the elf's opinion. Faced with the situation, Lily invokes her species' Our Father, summoning a sacred radiant light that dispels the darkness and illuminates their path. Zenos, surprised, discovers that the girl actually possesses elementary magical abilities, with proper lighting allowing them to examine the place carefully. He feels grateful to have finally found shelter. In his time with the Golden Phoenix adventurers, he spent most nights alone and in the open. Moreover, the beams there were still firm, and with a thorough cleaning, the place would be perfect to live in. However, Lily spots a shadow moving and further disagrees with her master's assessment. She hides behind him as both see a spirit floating down the stairs, demanding they give it the scent of life. Lily exclaims that this was definitely a problem, but Zenos remains calm as if nothing unusual were happening. According to him, he had already predicted that someone would reside there, as the house was too good to be unoccupied. In any case, the wraith attacks the young man, who promptly responds with healing magic, repelling the attack and disintegrating the ghost's arms. As soon as the situation calms down, Zenos casually explains that he had already defeated about 100 beings like her with his old team. Therefore, he gently asks the resident ghost if she would mind lending him a part of her house. Unable to accept such humiliation, the wraith tries to attack again only to realize that she cannot deal with that intruder. This shocks her, as no mortal had ever caused problems for Carmilla, the Queen of Wraiths. Determined, she summons her servants to get rid of the invaders, and Lily panics while Zenos scratches his head, lamenting that a peaceful solution is unfeasible. He then conjures superior healing, obliterating all the lesser wraiths as if they were nothing. Shocked, Carmilla questions the human's identity, and Zenos replies that he's no one special, just an underground healer. Returning to the main subject, he apologizes for the invasion, but emphasizes that it would really help him to have a place to sleep and some space to treat his patients. With no other option, the ghost grants the human the first floor, reserving the second floor for herself. Lily can't decide if she's happy or horrified by this situation. Sometime later, they cleaned the place, transforming it into something resembling a real clinic. By the way, Lily asks if she can go out and publicize the clinic, but Zenos doesn't want to arouse suspicion at the royal hospital, preferring clients to find them naturally. Luckily, someone actually appears the moment Zenos finishes speaking, and it turns out to be precisely the lizard man he had healed a few days earlier in the tavern. To everyone's surprise, Zenos had already anticipated that visit. After all, someone suffering from a magical burn is probably not an ordinary person, and usually has good reasons to avoid conventional hospitals. Impressed by the human's shrewdness, the lizard man introduces himself as Zond and asks if he could examine his older sister. The woman steps forward, revealing a terrible injury caused by a magical bullet wound. Upon examining the wound, Zenos deduces that it must have been caused by a poisoned magic weapon, and to me, that arm looks rotten. But okay, we'll continue. Our protagonist says the bullet is still inside, and she asks if he discovered all this with just one look, and he acknowledges that he did. In any case, after a more detailed analysis, Zenos concludes that her arm cannot be saved, suggesting amputation before the poison spreads further. With a sigh, the woman asks how much this little game will cost her. Calmly, the doctor states that it will be 1 million yen. Her brother immediately protests such a high price, but she tells him to relax as she will take care of it. Curious, she asks if he will maintain that price, knowing that she is Zofia the Tornado. Upon hearing this, Zenos realizes that he has just gained his first important client. After all, he knows that Zofia is one of the 3 leaders who command the slums, leader of the lizard people, and a heroic figure among the oppressed members of the community, who steals from corrupt merchants to support the poor. She demands to be convinced why she should pay 1 million for an amputation, and Zenos clarifies that he wouldn't charge that amount unless he intended to regenerate her limb completely, and that it's exhausting as hell. Furthermore, he no longer works for free and will not tolerate arrogance in his clinic, be it from a gang leader or the Pope himself, and only expects to be well compensated for his excellent services. In disbelief, Zofia admits she has never heard of a healer capable of regenerating limbs. Equally surprised, Zenos had no idea that other healers couldn't do that. In any case, with the patient's permission, the doctor begins the treatment by summoning a scalpel made purely of mana. Zofia is again amazed by another of that man's hidden talents, something Zenos doesn't really understand. After all, how else could other doctors perform incisions? Putting those thoughts aside, he applies a healing spell to the affected area to anesthetize the pain, and then begins to cut Zofia's arm, which according to him is where the game becomes complex. First, he casts a defensive spell to stop the bleeding, simultaneously applying healing magic to amplify the regeneration of the wounded area. Then, methodically, he restores the bones of the arm first, followed by nerves, blood vessels, muscles, and finally the skin. Once completed, the tornado has a completely new arm. Exhausted after performing such an impeccable procedure, the healer sits down to catch his breath. Everyone is astonished by what they have just witnessed. Zonda points to something hanging upside down, asking what that strange thing is, and the doctor explains that it's their housemate, a wraith. Carmilla merely comments that she wished the human had died and withdraws, and Xenos assures them that the ghost girl is actually friendly and they don't need to worry. Zofia starts laughing, commenting that this doctor is as brilliant as he is hilarious, and since she likes him very much, she promises to send her subordinates to Xenos for treatment, guaranteeing excellent payment in return. Later, Lily prepares tea for her master and receives a pat on the head, but Xenos can't understand why she prepared 3 cups. The elf is about to explain that their other resident also enjoys some tea when, suddenly, the wraith herself appears out of nowhere, gently blowing on her cup to avoid burning her mouth. Honestly, Xenos finds this concern somewhat peculiar coming from the Queen of Wraiths, while Carmilla takes the opportunity to tell the human to mind his own business. Lily celebrates the recent increase in new patients at the clinic since Zofia's visit, although Carmilla finds it boring that no one has died yet. As soon as she says that, she distractedly takes a sip of the hot tea, burning her tongue, and rushes upstairs. The elf then wonders why the lizard men are constantly injured, and Xenos speculates that it's due to the ongoing war between factions in the slums, specifically lizard men, orcs, and he was about to reveal the third race involved when suddenly a loud crash outside the clinic interrupts him, leading him to deduce that the final group has just discovered their location. Moments later, the clinic door opens and a dozen humanoid wolves, some clearly with cooked brains from illicit substances, enter. They are led by a woman who introduces herself as Linga, leader of the slum werewolves. She demands to know if she's speaking with Xenos, the underground healer. Xenos remembers that Linga, known as the Tyrant, controls all illegal gambling operations in the underworld, and he finds it strangely fascinating to observe the type of clientele he's attracting. Regardless, the doctor informs her that the clinic hours are over for today unless it's an emergency. Linga bluntly replies that the emergency is Xenos himself, as her gang is involved in a fierce battle against the lizard faction. However, their rivals keep coming back as if their numbers never decrease. Eventually discovering the involvement of that underground healer, she decided that he needs to be eliminated. Upon declaring this, Linga raises an axe and slams it into the clinic floor, cracking the tiles, and immediately follows up with a strike at Xenos' neck. But her attack abruptly stops against a magic shield that protects him, causing her axe to shatter. Realizing the situation is escalating, Xenos quietly advises Lily to wait in the back. Linga orders her subordinates to attack the healer, but no matter what they try, nothing hurts him, not even a bite on the heel, and I lolled at that. Frustrated, the werewolf leader orders her pack to destroy the clinic while Xenos tries to talk to them, but no one listens. Suddenly, annoyed by the commotion, Carmilla decides to show up to chill their brains, making sure no Wi-Fi gets to the werewolves. At this, Xenos asks Carmilla to put on the brakes. After all, the first floor is his responsibility, and moreover, it's a place dedicated to saving lives, not extinguishing them. However, he thanks her for bothering on his behalf, and Carmilla gets a bit awkward and decides to just withdraw. And well, adding to the improbabilities of this anime that I'm simply loving, since werewolves are nocturnal creatures and have a terrifying fear of supernatural beings lurking in the darkness, Linga quickly surrenders to the healer as she thinks he commands a powerful wraith. The scene then changed, and the next day, to settle the score, an orc enters the clinic and announces that the leader of his faction, Lady Lowy, requests an audience with the underground healer. After the orc's visit, our man Xenos sighs deeply, mentioning he expected this. After all, dealing with lizards and werewolves, orcs would be next. By the way, he remembers their leader is an important person who made a fortune mining mana stones. He then thinks it's only been a month since the doctor opened his clinic, and in that time he's already dealt with all the faction leaders from the slums. Xenos then asks the orc if their leader is a reasonable person, and he replies she's as wise as she is honorable. Reflecting on this, Xenos notes that at least Zofia has been leaving expensive gifts at the clinic every day, and Linga is building a veritable palace next door as compensation for the mess she caused. So if the orc boss is similar to these two, he thinks he shouldn't have problems. Xenos asks why she didn't come personally, and the soldier replies he would never bring the chief to a place where werewolves and lizards are constantly coming and going, especially since she can barely move. Given the gravity of the situation, the healer ends up making a personal visit to the patient, being led to the middle of nowhere deep inside a mana cave to meet the much talked about sovereign of that race. Once there, Lowe greets him and he asks how she knew about him. She replies she'd rather not know, given how famous his work has become in the slums after his recent services. Naturally, the werewolves and lizards did their best to hide this rare gem, but Lova decided to investigate on her own and finally found him. Xenos gets annoyed at being so well known despite being clandestine, while Love points out that from what she's heard, he can perform any kind of healing if the price is right, and he confirms that working for free is a bit tiring. Anyway, the orc mentions she can't move from her spot right now and would love to know why. Xenos sees he's being tested in front of everyone, but has no choice but to examine the case. He then internally checks the patient's body, as there are no visible external injuries. Lova mentions she's never seen a doctor do that before, and well, he, in turn, has no idea how these people heal without fully investigating their bodies. By the way, he discovers a lump in her belly and feels mana surrounding the object. Lowe confirms it's a mana stone enchanted with an explosion and it has high potency. Xenos asks if someone put it in her food, but she confesses she mistook it for a rice cake and swallowed it. Xenos then sighs deeply and heads for the exit, assuring her she'll soon expel that thing naturally. However, Lowe explains it's not that simple, as she partially chewed the stone, and it won't be long before it detonates. The orc doesn't want to make any sudden movements precisely to avoid triggering that. The other problem is that her men don't want to leave her side, always vowing to die beside her if she bites the dust. Thus, Xenos asks what she wants him to do, and Lowe is willing to donate her wealth to him, because if this stone detonates, it will decree the end of the orcs in the slums, and the leader prefers to leave her wealth with someone who would make good use of it. Lowe heard that although the healer charges a lot for his services, he examines needy children for free, and that's something she sympathizes with. With that said, she throws a key to the human. He asks if Lowe ingested this mana stone long ago, and when she confirms, he walks towards her, summons a scalpel, and plunges it into the chief's belly, making the crazies around her go wild. However, Xenos raises his hand, holding the stone, leaving everyone perplexed. Lowe asks what on earth just happened, and he informs her he opened her stomach, removed the object, and then completely sealed it. Although impressed, Lowe warns the doctor to be careful with this explosive, and then Xenos wraps the stone with both hands and triggers a detonation that could be heard and felt outside the cave. Despite this, Xenos didn't have a single scratch. After all, he protected his hands with defensive magic. Of course, according to him, it hurt like hell, and everything only got better because he applied healing. In the end, the man returns the key to the orc, and she can't believe this guy refused all her fortune like that. Xenos replies that he only demands payment equivalent to the service rendered, and that seems a bit much. Lowe bursts out laughing and confesses she liked our scatterbrained protagonist so much that she now considers him the savior of the orc race, and that from now on, he can count on them for whatever is needed, including 24-hour personal security at his clinic. But Xenos honestly prefers that not to happen. After surviving the risk of becoming pate, the orc says she's hungry, so she grabs 2 rice cakes and offers them to the doctor, but he prefers to eat at home. Speaking of home, a few days later, back at his residence, Xenos notices that Lily is a bit down, and she explains that Zofia, Linga, and Lowe have been visiting a lot lately. Thinking about it now, our protagonist agrees since Zofia shows up on the day of the moon, Linga on the day of water, and Lowe on the day of gold, and none of them are injured, sick, or anything like that, so the absent-minded doctor doesn't understand why they keep coming there. Lily wonders if he can't even guess the reason, so he supposes the 3 have a lot of free time, and I love the innocence of this guy. Lily was about to give her opinion, but Carmilla interrupts to say it's love, clarifying that these women are in love with Xenos. He replies that's ridiculous since he's just an unlicensed healer operating outside the law, but she informs him that her spectral eyes don't lie. Whenever she observes from the ceiling, they look at him like truly enamored women, and Lily admits she's worried since all 3 are very beautiful, and Xenos adds that they are also quite problematic. Finding it funny, Carmilla guarantees it's only a matter of time until the next faction war occurs because of a certain healer, so it's good for Lily to choose her weapons soon. For her part, the elf remembers she's still a child for such things, and doesn't come close to the beauty of the others. But the Spectre assures that all 4 enamored maidens are equally beautiful. And our protagonist just sighs and thinks he can't even laugh at this nonsense, it sounds so absurd. It turns out he didn't even need to think about it anymore because the nightmare was about to become reality. Sometime later, the first to appear at the clinic is Zofia the Tornado, announcing she's about to declare war against rival gangs and wants to know if Xenos is willing to join the Lizardmen. Following her was Linga, the Tyrant, and according to her, the hour of revenge had come, and Xenos must join the Lupines for the conflict. Finally, Loewe came to deliver her message, and thus a war was established between the three factions, with Xenos at the center of the chaos, having received generous gifts from each leader to ensure his participation. Carmilla jokes that many will die because of the doctor's scalpel, while Lily remains sulking in this whole mess. The scene shifts, and the next day, the fight between the groups begins at noon in an abandoned arena on the outskirts. Accompanied by their soldiers, the three leaders meet in the center of the ring. Zofia praises the courage of the other two for showing up, knowing they're going to bite the dust. Linga finds the joke terrible and promises to show her enemies how benevolent she has been to them from the start. Lastly, Loewe ridicules the notion that the opponents think they can face orcs in mortal combat. In the midst of this, Xenos shouts from the stands to get everyone's attention, saying he's not there to stop the fight since conflicts between these groups have lasted for years and years, and obviously there's a lot of accumulated resentment among everyone. Actually, he just came to say that they should fight until they are satisfied, and Lily couldn't be more confused, while the leaders decide that the winner will take the doctor as a prize once the enemies are dead. Without delay, Zofia pulls out her daggers and almost hits Linga's neck, who escapes at the last moment. Loewe launches herself against the lizard, who also deftly dodges, throwing the orc like a bomb onto the gangs. Linga doesn't take this lightly and strikes her attacker with her two-handed axe, forcing Zofia to block with difficulty. Once again, the orc comes with another flying kick, creating a hole in the battlefield, while the lizard leader, after dodging the impact, faces the orc battalion and manages to claim some victims along the way. Linga then knocks down the lizards in front of her, while Loewe smashes the skull of a werewolf who could do nothing to react. From then on, the fight escalated with great intensity into a generalized conflict and continued intensely until late afternoon, and the crowd no longer understands why, until at a certain point, they begin to realize that no matter how beaten someone is, no one drops dead. Zofia then realizes her wounds are regenerating, until Xenos speaks again to remind everyone that he didn't come to interrupt the conflict, but since everyone involved is his patient, he will continue to heal each of them until the end. And realizing that continuing this fight is a waste of time, Zofia sits on the ground, feeling foolish for not having noticed the situation before. Linga has never heard of a healer capable of restoring so many at once, and Loewe declares that this fight will never end. Xenos agrees, of course, but not just because of his medical intervention, but because of the infinite feeling of revenge that crosses generations of each race present, and he guarantees that the conflict will never end, as there are always scores to settle. Therefore, it's fine for the factions to continue the war, but know that Xenos will charge for every regeneration he performs. Soon, the three leaders burst into laughter and agree that it's not worth giving vent to all this hatred this way, so they declare the war has just ended. Zofia remembers an orc saying that offering forgiveness is having strength, and with that the three clench their fists in the air and decide there's only one fight worth fighting. Xenos asks what they are talking about, and Lily merely mentions that he is very popular. Putting that aside, she asks why he intervened this way, and Xenos shares that he once had a mentor who said, "A healer is third-rate if they only heal wounds, second-rate if they heal and comfort, and first-rate if they make the world a better place." Interested, the elf wants to know what this mentor was like, and Xenos confesses she was strange but an impressive person. Because of his mentor, no matter how third-rate he is, he wants to make the slum a better place. Or at least that's the discourse he's going to adopt. Because if no one else in the slum gets hurt, he'll be out of a job. After noticing that the guy is quite clever, Lily also points out that she likes him. He replies the same, but she gets annoyed because he didn't understand the tone of her sentence, although she doesn't want to explain exactly what she meant. Anyway, Xenos, who is no fool, announces it's time to charge for the consultation and go home. The scene shifts, and the next day, the commander of the Kingdom's division calls Vice Commander Krishna after hearing disturbing rumors about the territorial conflict between the demi-humans in the slums having calmed down. Although it's a dispute of many years that everyone knows well, the Kingdom worries about it, but not in the way we're thinking, my friends, because Hertzeth has prospered under its rigid hierarchy system, with royalty at the top. The citizens vent their frustration on the poor, who in turn vent on each other, and that's what maintains the balance of this society. According to the commander, what scares him is the possibility of the poor uniting, as this would be a threat to the aristocracy, the ruling class. The king is like a son to the people, and it is the duty of the Order of Knights to defend the capital where their ruler resides. Krishna doesn't understand where the commander is getting the idea that there's a peacemaker among the factions because they have always hated each other deeply and will never unite, and there isn't a single being capable of standing between the tornado, the tyrant, and the mighty one. About this, the commander agrees, but that goes against the rumor he heard. Apparently, there really is a peacemaker among the gangs who was able to mediate the three and pacify the conflict, even risking a supposed union between them. Whether it's just a poorly told story or not, the army cannot ignore this, so it is the mission of Krishna, the Iron Rose, to arrest the rebel who threatens to unite the poor against the ruling class. Man, look at the trouble our protagonist got into for being a good person. The scene then changes, and meanwhile, Zenos sneezes because they are talking about him, and this worries Lily. Amidst much discussion about who would take care of Zenos, our protagonist finishes treating Zofia, and Lily notes it had been a while since the lizard woman needed treatment. Zofia jokes about almost signing up for the household health plan due to her frequent visits, and the healer reminds her that it's not a club because the woman comes even when there's no problem to solve. In fact, the tornado mentions she had a fight yesterday with soldiers of the Order, as they are keeping an eye on the gang. Zenos remembers that the first time he treated the lizard, she and her brother were also wounded by soldiers, and she confirms they were caught when they tried to sneak into an aristocrat's mansion to borrow some items. Speaking of which, Zon remembers there was a crazy woman shooting with that magic flame weapon. The person in question is the vice commander known as the Iron Rose, who always makes a hell of a mess in her appearances. Carmilla smiles, imagining the chaos that would happen if she appeared there and joined the other three who already frequent the place. And Zenos, who couldn't be more wrong, thinks he's free from this worry. After all, the Royal Knights wouldn't go after a clandestine healer working in a pigsty. But Carmilla assures him that's not quite the case, as her Spectre's instinct is usually very accurate, and well, she couldn't be more right. Ignoring the warnings, the doctor invites Lily to grab a bite, and then the other three enter uninvited. Zofia wants salad, while Linga wants fish, and Leve wants meat. In turn, Zenos makes it clear that no one asked them, but the truth is, he no longer had control over his own clinic, which was decidedly dominated by the most dangerous criminals in the kingdom. During the meal, before going up for a nap, Carmilla reminds Zenos that he is the only one in the kingdom capable of keeping those three in line, and the young man feels like a beast tamer with this information, mentioning that he hopes to have no more problematic visits, something Carmilla just retorts by saying that with those words he has just sealed his fate. The scene shifts, and in the slums, we see that the races that were once mortal enemies have begun to live together in harmony, and Krishna can barely believe it when she sees the friendly atmosphere. She approaches a random lizard and notes that his race seems to be getting along with the werewolves and orcs, and the man replies that they're not so bad once you slowly get to know them. The officer asks what happened to the war between the races, so the lizard just replies he won't say anything else, emphasizing that he doesn't want to draw attention. At this moment, Krishna loses her patience and points her pistol at the lizard's belly, but he still refuses to answer, replying that everyone owes that man a lot. Amidst the chaos, the lizard sees Zofia and Zond passing by, so he shouts the chief's names, and quickly, Krishna leaves to avoid trouble in enemy territory. Upon seeing the lizard leaders, she remembers that the siblings should be missing an arm, but they regenerated as if by a miracle. In search of answers while getting lost on the outskirts of the slum, the vice commander arrives at Zenos' clinic and asks how to get back to the city. At this moment, Lily appears and the human apparently recognizes the elf and then points her weapon at Zenos and fires something like a purple cloud at the healer, thanking him for the coincidence. At that moment, the officer thought she hadn't expected to find another target in a place like that, as she was working on a different case while also investigating a series of child kidnappings. Noticing that the elf and the human were not related, Krishna grew suspicious and decided to act. Lily tried to explain to the woman that she had been taken in by Zenos, but Krishna insisted that human trafficking was illegal unless conducted through appropriate channels. Lily then made it clear that Xanos had saved her, which made the vice commander realize she had made a mistake. Regardless, the ammunition she fired wasn't lethal, though our protagonist would still be out of commission for a while as she was a perfectionist in her work and her only flaw was her explosive temper. Out of nowhere, Xanos himself corrected her, saying that her only flaw was, in fact, her terrible sense of direction. Surprised by the situation, the officer apologized for acting hastily, but wanted to understand how the young man hadn't been hurt. He explained that he had used defensive magic, which she didn't comprehend, as it shouldn't have been enough to stop her magical weapons. With that, she approached and checked that he had no injuries, commenting that many unusual things had been happening lately. In turn, Zenos responded that being shot by someone he had never seen fit that category for him. Krishna then asked if he was some renowned sorcerer who had dedicated his life to defensive arts from an early age and had mastered that field of study to the point of being known as the one who worked hard for defensive magic. First, Zenos said she was wrong, and second, he claimed she was terrible with names. She then mentioned mid-argument that he might fool others, but it wouldn't fly with her. After all, she was the vice commander of the Royal Knights Order. Hearing the woman's important title, Zenos and Lily were stunned, while Krishna demanded he cooperate with the investigation. Given the gravity of the situation, Zenos hung a banner from the ceiling to signal that no one should approach the clinic, and then sat down with Krishna to see what she truly wanted. The officer revealed she was in the slums on a secret mission to locate and apprehend an individual. Zenos found it curious that the woman was revealing all of that, given that the mission was supposed to be secret, but she replied that it was every citizen's duty to cooperate with the Knight's Order. Thus, he asked who she was looking for, and she whispered, "The mediator, the one who settled disputes between the factions in the slums." Zenos then spit out his tea the moment he heard this, while Camila appeared with that look that portended trouble. As a defender of order, Krishna couldn't ignore someone who wielded so much power, but she assured that she hadn't taken anything from the demi-humans, even after threatening them. Since this person seemed to have good control over these races, the woman had no doubt he was a servant of the devil. Zenos argued that perhaps the individual just didn't want to stand out, and that leaving him alone might be the best option. She then asked if he knew the mediator, but Zenos replied it was just his intuition speaking. The problem, according to the officer, was that allowing someone like that to act on their own will could pose a threat to the entire nation in the future. Lily didn't believe the mediator was thinking on such a scale, because although he was strict with money, she bet he didn't like seeing people get hurt. From what the elf had said, Krishna asked if she knew the person being sought, but the little one desperately replied that she didn't. In any case, Krishna had already figured it would be difficult to track the suspect, indicating that their conversation had come to an end. Zenos then offered to show her the way to the city, and although the woman noticed that he seemed very eager for her to leave, she decided to get up and depart. As she left, she questioned why there was a bed in the middle of the room, and Zenos lied that he was thinking of throwing it out, so he had left it there. With that, the vice commander asked if she could use the bed to sleep, as she needed to find a base of operations for her mission and believed that place was perfect, making it clear she would pay for her stay. Subsequently, Carmilla emerged from behind and silently commented that the clinic's owner was ready to welcome yet another dangerous woman into his life. Later, Krishna was received more calmly, so Lily served her a hot drink. Unable to drink it, the young lady admitted that her only flaw was sensitivity to high-temperature beverages, leading Zenos to count yet another only flaw this person claimed to have, and I confess I've lost count. In the midst of this, Lily seemed displeased and told the doctor to give her a lap and do his usual. After the initial shock, the young man understood what she wanted and began to caress the elf's head. Carmilla reappeared to make it clear that the little one was jealous, and Krishna became confused, seeing that the young man was talking to no one behind him, as the specter was invisible. Carmilla explained that Lily was trying to show off to the stranger who had appeared, not wanting to accept the arrogant woman who had shot Zenos for no reason with a magic weapon. Speaking of Lily, she noticed that her friend's tea was still hot and offered to blow on it for him. Next, she offered to comb his hair, and to compromise the situation a bit more, she offered to put an apple in his mouth. Seeing that Krishna wasn't bothered by this, the elf decided to use the secret weapon Carmilla had taught her. So she grabbed Zenos' face and began to say that she wouldn't let him sleep that night. However, before she could finish what she wanted to say, the poor girl fainted on the spot and was put to rest on the bed. Now alone with Zenos, Krishna recalled that according to him, the elf was captured by slave traders, so she wants to know who they are. Zenos confesses he has no idea, and the officer observes there's an illegal child trafficking hub in that area. The man asks if that's why he was shot, and the woman apologizes once more, emphasizing that her only flaw is her impatient temper, but that despite that she still needs to be perfect for the royal guard, as a hero of the people. So one flaw is tolerable. Believing Xenos to be a defense mage, she wonders if he could fully regenerate an arm if he mastered healing spells as he does defensive ones. Xenos was about to answer, but the officer interrupted him, stating that only a saint or a high-level secret healer could perform such a feat. Krishna says this because she caused that kind of damage to Zofia the tornado in a fight, but when she saw her in the slum with her thugs, her arm was intact. Therefore, she believes that someone capable of such regeneration would certainly command enough respect to be heard in the community. In any case, the officer promises to begin her real investigation tomorrow and swears to apprehend this agitator. Xenos asks why the woman feels so threatened by the slums, so Krishna reveals that her mother was killed by someone who lived there. Her mother was a deeply kind person who visited the slums daily to feed the hungry, and when she was killed, they said it happened when her wedding ring was stolen. Although she saved many from hunger, in her final moment there was no one to save her, and for that reason she decided to become an invincible hero who would bring justice to criminals and prevent this from happening to anyone else. With this in mind, she became the youngest vice commander in the history of the Royal Knights, and her record in the institution earned her the nickname Iron Rose. Many use this nickname to accuse the woman of being too harsh, but the truth is different. For her face, she says, is like an iron mask, as she has found it difficult to smile since her mother's death. The next day, Xenos attends to Zofia after Krishna said she would only return at night, while Carmilla comments that the officer's story isn't that uncommon, because when one lives 300 years, one certainly sees many cases where a person's life was turned upside down for various reasons. That said, she asks about the banner, and the clinic owner believes he will remove it from the ceiling for now. Then, while he was healing the tornado, she was going to mention that one of her subordinates saw a Royal Knights officer, but as soon as she says that, Krishna herself suddenly appears in the clinic. Immediately, the two draw their weapons and assume combat stances, and Carmilla observes that Xenos looks like a husband caught red-handed, while Lily screams that Zofia just got lost and ended up there. Zofia takes the opportunity to confirm the elf's version, and then Krishna asks what happened to the lizard's arm, believing it was the mediator who healed it, this element that gathers criminals to threaten the community's residents. Mocking her, Zofia tells the knight that she can also find criminals in all walks of life, and furthermore, since she investigates child trafficking, she should know that the head of the scheme is an aristocrat. Krishna responds that the network of this illegal trade is concentrated in the slum, and then the lizard tells her that precisely to prevent traces from reaching Kalendor, the true culprit. The vice commander doesn't believe it, as Kalendor is a philanthropist passionate about educating orphans, but the tornado didn't expect this human to care about what she said. In any case, it's clear that Krishna's mistake is letting herself be deceived by appearances, and Zofia reveals that the mediator is the opposite of that, never having judged the people of the slums for who they are and only saving those who truly need it. As much as she hates to admit it, Zofia is sure that he would even save the vice commander because, unlike her, he doesn't have this ridiculous sense of justice that thinks all evil comes from the slum. That said, Xenos steps in front of Krishna's weapon and confesses that Zofia is his patient as he is the mediator. The woman doubts as the mediator is a master of healing magic while the young man's specialty is defensive magic, and it's impossible to master two different schools at such a high level. Xenos explains that he is not a master of either, but that the two are quite similar in essence. Krishna still doesn't believe him, but since Xenos has shown support for demi-humans and the mediator, she decides to stay elsewhere, as she cannot tarnish her reputation as a perfect hero alongside people like these. With that, she goes to this Lord Kalendor and highlights that there has been a lot of activity from thieving lizards in that area lately, and her intention is to increase local security, so it would be good if he and his noble colleagues were more cautious. As part of this, the officer wishes to conduct a security assessment at his mansion. The aristocrat sees no problem but confesses that he would like to be notified in advance, while the officer assures that a surprise inspection would be more effective to verify the usual level of security. In this way, the vice commander obtains permission to begin her analysis and reflects that Kalendor was pointed out by the tornado as the leader of illegal child trade, but she feels she is wasting her time there. After conducting this inspection, she reveals that the man's security is quite strict, but if she had to point out a flaw, it would be the distribution. Kalendor asks what that means, so the woman evades the question and asks to use the bathroom before leaving. On her way there, she ponders that Kalendor is somewhere in the upper middle echelon of the aristocracy, so the size of his guard is strange. Furthermore, there's the distribution of soldiers around the mansion, as there are many more guards in the back than at the front entrance. Thinking about this, Krishna takes a look at the back of the residence and finds a stronghold with a staircase leading underground, then descends through that dark place until she finds chained children. She assures them that she is the hero who will save them until she is shot in the back. In a dramatic turn, Kalendor appears with a magic pistol and comments that the Royal Knight's weapons are quite powerful, perfect for intimidating children. With that, he shoots Krishna again, teaching the officer that her job is to stay quiet and keep the poor in line. At this moment, Iron Rose asks the children for forgiveness, as it seems she won't be able to get them out of there. In her final moments, she thinks of her mother and how she failed to be the hero she had promised. However, Zofia arrives alongside Xenos, and the doctor jokes that this house call will be expensive. The Lord questions who these people are, but Xenos assures him he's just an ordinary healer, while Zofia explains that she only showed this fellow the way. Knowing that no one would complain if he killed a lizard woman from the slums, Kalendor orders Tornado to lie down, but when Xenos lets out a sigh, the Lord shoots him and bursts into laughter. However, the healer's defensive magic protects him from the impact, allowing him to gradually approach, making the citizen freeze. Just then, when the pistol runs out of ammunition, the noble draws another but ends up stumbling and falling to the ground. Xenos picks up the pistol that was thrown near him and points it at the Lord, who questions how an inferior being dares to do this to a noble, and Xenos replies that if you're going to shoot people, you should be prepared to get shot too. Seeing that the fellow is serious, Kalendor offers whatever it takes to be spared. And Xenos admits he has no anger towards him because he just met him, but was really annoyed that he shot him. Kalendor begs for forgiveness, as if his noble status made his apology more valuable than usual, which only makes the healer more impatient, making it clear that there's another person the man should really apologize to. Since Kalendor doesn't understand, Xenos shoots the noble for kidnapping his future clients. The bullet creates a repulsive effect, merely throwing the target and tearing his clothes in a humiliating manner, and the limiter the shooter activated ensures the shot is not lethal. After all, Xenos believes it's not his duty to judge this criminal. Meanwhile, Krishna is sure she's going to die and asks the protagonist to report everything that happened to the Royal Knight's order. Having said that, Xenos confesses that it's quite embarrassing to see the so-called Iron Rose give up like that, and while healing the woman, tells her not to be shocked when the consultation bill arrives at her house. Haunted by the man's ability, Krishna emotionally highlights that he is a hero, but he replies that he is just an underground healer with a dilapidated clinic. After being healed, she laments not being the perfect hero she thought she was, and Xenos tells her that perfection doesn't exist, as people who fight for something will get hurt one way or another, and then, when that happens, it's his job to ensure they don't perish. However, he points out that Krishna is a hero to certain people there, and when the woman realizes this, the children ask if the hero is still there, and this touches her. Krishna thought her mother was just a poor victim, but her eyes always sparkled when she fed the street children. And indeed, she was a hero to those boys, even if she was clumsy, forgetful, and irritable at times, and that despite her many flaws, her mother was her daughter's hero. Later, Zofia's subordinates remove the children from the underground and she leaves with Xenos before the royal guard arrives. Before leaving, Krishna asks why the doctor came to save her, and he says he did it because she wouldn't be able to pay his bill if she had died. Hearing this, the officer bursts into laughter, acknowledging that this difficulty is one of her many flaws. The scene changes, and the next day we see Xenos and Lily heading out for a stroll to buy a new type of tea, both eager to try the beverage. At this moment, we get a glimpse into our protagonist's past. Years ago, on those same streets, he was just another homeless person among the many scattered across the city. One day, while wandering, Aston found him sitting in a street corner and invited him to join his group, assuming Xenos probably had nothing. Xenos didn't believe someone from the slums could become an adventurer, and Aston admitted that yes, they usually couldn't, but argued that if he had the will and talent, it wouldn't matter where he came from. Xenos mentioned that he knew a bit of healing magic, and the boar laughed at him in disbelief. After all, healing arts required a lot of study, something a mere street dweller would never achieve. Still, he kept the offer open and extended his hand, not obviously believing in Xenos, but because he needed a slave. Sometime later, we see them on a mission together when they encountered a wolf. The warrior ended up suffering a cut on his arm, and Xenos quickly healed the wound. However, after defeating the enemy, the group leader decided that Zenos was dead weight for the team. While gratitude overflows for some, it's scarce for others. So much so that on that day, our main character ended up going through that humiliating expulsion that we saw in the first episode. We then return to the present, and now we see that the band of idiots has a new member. As they head to a dungeon, Aston grumbles that the place is too far. He acknowledges that this is a chance to impress the 7 great nobles, but feels that it's all just a waste of energy. A teammate admits he's still hungover, while the archer just wants to finish the job and go back to drinking, something the mage thinks is a great idea, especially because the waitress's eyes sparkled when they said they were part of the Golden Phoenix. Seriously, folks, Zenos thinks he was kicked out, but for me, that's definitely a blessing in disguise because heaven forbid putting up with people like these guys. At this moment, we see some monsters appear, and the leader draws his sword and says it's time to collect some furs for Lord Fennel. He tells Guile to cast a defensive spell as a precaution, and Guile activates something called Encapsulate, a barrier spell that coats the body with a protective shield. Dodging the monster's first attack, Aston is confident he would never be hit by such a weak creature. However, he ends up suffering a severe burn on his arm, and to make matters worse, he notices that one of his colleagues took a nasty bite to the jugular. Aston immediately screams for Andres to cast a spell, but the mage is scared stiff and thus can't do anything. Meanwhile, Guile's shield spell doesn't seem to be working correctly, and the leader thinks it's probably because of the hangover. With no other alternative, Aston orders a retreat, meaning, without the useless Zenos in the party, those lions are nothing but kittens. After the escape, he demands to know how his team struggled against mere B+ level monsters, and Andres responds by saying that he didn't do anything useful either. Guile then asks if Zenos' healing was really fake, and Aston insists it was, mentioning that perhaps it's time to hire a real healer, not a good-for-nothing like Zenos. In other words, besides this guy being arrogant, boorish, and ill-tempered, he's also blind and stupid. The scene changed, and shortly after, they hire a healer named Umin, and I even feel sorry for this poor soul. She obviously makes it clear that she works mainly in the capital and has no real combat experience, and that, in fact, she's not even sure why a group famous for always coming out unscathed like the Golden Phoenix needs an average healer like her. And if they don't answer you, I will. They came out unscathed because Zenos saved their butts day in and day out. Now they're in trouble, something Aston agrees with, as he mentions they have their own problems. Guile asks if Yuma, the archer, will be okay, and Umin says he'll survive but won't be adventuring again anytime soon. Aston takes this as proof that the guy didn't belong on the team anyway, and that losing an archer won't make a difference, and that the mission will continue, as Lord Fennel wants a scarf made of firefox fur for his daughter's birthday, and he won't miss the chance to impress a noble. And with this circus of horrors duly assembled, the group enters the cave. And while on one hand I feel sorry for Umin, on the other hand, I have the feeling that any misfortune for this group is not enough. Inside the cave, the leader draws his Hunber sword, promising to slice them into pieces. As soon as he finishes speaking, a fireball flies towards them, and he is forced to deflect it with his sword. We see that the foxes had prepared an ambush and were now attacking at full speed. Aston then orders Guile to cast a shield and then runs towards one of the beasts, engaging in combat. After dodging another fireball, a flame ends up hitting Andres in the stomach, taking him out of the scene. As the fight unfolds, we see that this group is such a huge sham that even the idiot Aston can't do anything, and he thinks he's feeling as if his body has suddenly become slow and unresponsive. Umin warns that Andres will kick the bucket without proper healing, while Guile panics and asks what they should do now. Well, with the whole place going up in flames, Aston feels an overwhelming pressure approaching from all sides, and he decides to flee with his tail between his legs once again. Outside the dungeon, Aston criticizes Guile for failing to cast the buff again, but Umin argues that the shield spell worked, otherwise the mage would have ended up in a coffin from the blow. The leader demands that the healer fix the problem, but she explains that she needs to adapt the spell to the nature of the wound, and that she did what she could, but Andres needs to be taken to a hospital with fully equipped healing circles. Aston says there's no time and tells her to figure it out, but she insists that even top-tier healers couldn't do anything in these conditions, perhaps a saint or elite magic users. At that moment, Aston, the brainless one, wonders if his problems started the instant he kicked Zenos out. But since his intelligence is subtle, he obviously still refuses to believe that a good-for-nothing like that could have really been good at anything. A few days later, after Lord Fennel's daughter's birthday had already passed, the Golden Phoenix visited the noble's estate without the fox fur. Aston obviously wasn't even received by Fennel himself. Instead, a butler met them, saying that he felt like an idiot for having placed hope in that team of adventurers. After all, the Lord was embarrassed, having nothing to give his daughter at her party. Aston, who is completely incapable of admitting he's wrong, showed that besides being stupid, he's also ill-tempered, as he attributed the failure to his party being betrayed by an ex-teammate named Zenos. At that, he remembered that he had taken care not to register anything about Zenos' time in the group, and obviously didn't want a slum rat to appear in the team's official records, so he let the matter drop and asked for another chance, promising to recruit members who could really do the job. And after getting another opportunity, guess what, folks? Yes, the idiot and ill-tempered man has the brilliant idea of going after Zenos, thinking that the guy must be desperate to rejoin the Golden Phoenix again, because as much as he hates to admit it, deep down he knows that it was that healer who kept things running. And if I have one wish for the Kamisama of anime, it would certainly be that he doesn't allow our protagonist to succumb to this shamelessness. Without wasting time, he and Guile head straight to the slums, only to find the three races living in peace, something he never thought he'd see. Guile mentions that the slum is large and that they don't even know if he's really there or not, but Aston, the idiot, has a brilliant idea. He will hire the three faction leaders to help him track down our protagonist. First, he visits the leader of the Lizardmen, but Zofia is quick to say that she has more important things to do, like seeing the doctor. Aston finds himself thinking how stunning she is and how once he becomes a noble, he could add her to his collection. Just look at the ideas of this filthy creep. He then mentions that his name is Aston, the leader of the Golden Phoenix, and that he is looking for a man named Zenos. This makes Zofia burst out laughing very hard, as she is looking directly at the fools who kicked the doctor out of their team, and just to rub it in their faces, she points out how ridiculous Aston looks. This irritates him, and his hand moves towards his sword, but instantly, all of Zofia's subordinates are ready to attack, while she tells them to get lost, because Zenos has much better things to do than listen to two idiots like them. Aston raises his voice, demanding to know if she knows who she's talking to, while Zofia, fierce as always, just cuts the guy with a look and asks if he knows who he's talking to. Aston then leaves the place, and they go to see the leader of the werewolves. The moment Linga finds out they were the idiots who kicked Zenos out, she just thinks it would be better for him to die and reincarnate as a bathroom bug. Aston once again tries to act tough, but he's too stupid to realize that he's a loser. Something Linga tries to make very clear by appearing behind him, mentioning that tearing his head off would be child's play for her. Lastly, they pay a visit to the orc commander, and right away, she makes it clear that she knows exactly who they are. With nothing more to say, Aston turns to leave, but Lowe warns him, saying that if she ever finds out he even touched Zenos, the orcs won't sit idly by. After 3 failed attempts, Aston simply can't understand how Zenos is so respected by all the slum leaders. His intellectual incapacity is so great that he even entertains the hypothesis that there's someone truly awesome with that name and that everyone is confusing him. But guess what? Yes, Guile spots the healer himself walking down the street alongside Lily, and without hesitation they go after him. As they approach, the Phoenix leader makes a sarcastic comment, saying it's a miracle Zenos is still alive, but our protagonist is clearly not happy to see them there, and asks what they want. Aston plays dumb, asking what he thinks they want, but Zenos just says he might have balls, but none are made of crystal, and since he's not part of the Scooby-Doo gang either, he turns to leave. Realizing the situation is getting out of control, Aston tries to throw a bait, saying that Zenos should feel lucky as he's getting the chance to return to the Golden Phoenix. Zenos immediately rejects the idea, thank Kami-sama of anime. However, he reconsiders when he sees that Aston is being brutally insistent, and with that he makes a proposal, saying that he is willing to accompany them occasionally, but only if the payment is fair. 50,000 won per healing, 1 million for serious injuries, and triple that if they need buffs or defensive magic. Obviously with no discounts, Aston gets angry, screaming that he's eating sardines and burping caviar, as he probably doesn't even have a decent roof over his head in this pigsty. But at that instant, a lizard man on the street thanks the doctor for treating his leg. Suddenly, a small crowd gathers around, where each person shows their gratitude for everything Zenos does for the community. And as soon as the group disperses, Aston makes a last attempt, claiming that he came personally to grant Zenos permission to rejoin the team again, and that he took him in when he needed it and all that petty nonsense. But Zenos just shakes his head, saying it's too late and that he's not interested. Feeling humiliated, Aston draws his sword and lunges, but before he can reach him, a shot echoes, and we see that Krishna takes him down, because as a law official, she can't simply ignore an attempted crime. But obviously, she's not there for justice, she's there to see Zenos. However, since her sense of direction is terrible, she got lost on the way to his clinic and happened to find him. Stunned, Aston realizes that he is standing before the youngest vice commander in the history of the Royal Knights, and even this amazing woman seems close to Zenos. As he stumbles to get up, Krishna announces that she is arresting him for attempted assault, and since this guy is beyond despicable, he obviously blames Guile for making him act this way, then flees the scene. Later that night, at Zenos' clinic, the demi-human leaders meet with the doctor to discuss the men they encountered. Zofia says she had a bad feeling and sent her men after them, but they lost their trail. Linga did the same, and not even her werewolves could pick up their scent, while Love admits that the two managed to avoid the entire orc network. Since no one is sure what Aston might try next, there's a real concern that he'll resort to the Underground Guild. A guild that handles illegal tasks and is untouchable even by demi-humans, and these are people who will do anything for the right price. On the other hand, Zenos doesn't believe Aston has the money to hire them, something Carmilla agrees with, because if he was chasing Zenos thinking he would work for free, he's clearly broke. Even so, Zofia heard that there's someone in that guild who accepts jobs under certain conditions, even without cash payment, and they call him the Guide. The scene changes, and later that night, Lily finds Zenos awake and restless. Worried that he's not sleeping, she offers him tea to help him relax. After a sip, he politely compliments the taste as he always does, and this makes her very happy. She gets up and begins to gently caress his head, and he asks what she's doing. She replies that when she has trouble sleeping, he gently does this, so she just wants to return the favor, while he expresses that because of this, he'll have a great night's sleep. But a few minutes later, it's Lily who's out cold. Zenos puts her to bed and returns to his armchair, where Carmilla is now waiting, serving herself the third of the 3 cups served. She asks if seeing his old team again is what's keeping him awake, and Zenos teases her, saying she's very kind. She pretends to be indifferent, but the strange way she reacts only makes it even more obvious that she really cares. Zenos then expresses that, to be honest, he had already forgotten those frauds, but when some memories of what they had done resurfaced, the doctor regretted not having beaten them up when he had the chance. Carmilla asked how it was possible for him to learn healing in the slums, and he explained that one day he was trying to revive a corpse. Yes, he knew it was forbidden sorcery, but he had no idea at the time, as he was just a child, and his mentor even slapped him on the head for messing with that kind of thing. Carmilla expresses that it's not exactly the same thing, but when she was alive, there was something called artificial life sorcery, which was used to create golems. Zenos mentioned that this was 300 years ago during the Human-Demon War, when the Demon Lords still existed. According to Carmilla, this was a lost form of demonic magic that used a magic stone as a core, mixing carbon and sulfur to create the golem. Golems felt no fear, no exhaustion, they were true war machines. By the way, Zenos was curious about what she was doing 300 years ago, but she admitted she had forgotten. After all, it was a long time, and Zenos understood that she didn't want to talk about herself. Suddenly, the two heard and felt a massive bang coming from the slums, and Carmilla flew into the sky to get a better view of what had happened and couldn't believe her eyes because wouldn't you know it, it was a bloody golem causing a lot of damage in the slum. We then have a brief flashback, and now we go to the Underground Guild, yes, that place where the tough guys hang out and take on shady jobs. At this moment, we meet the Guide. That guy who provides his services not just for money, but he doesn't tell us what he'll demand in return at this point. He's talking to a certain someone you can probably guess, who is hiring him to get revenge on someone and their associates on his behalf. The Guide, ever curious, questions the reason the person wants revenge, mentioning that while other members of the Underground Guild value money and only that, he in turn takes great interest in what is motivating what is asked of him. Initially, the man hesitates, refusing to explain his motivations. However, seeing the Guide start to walk away, he gives in, realizing the deal won't proceed without answers. What he reveals is less a plan for justice and more a desperate, selfish attempt to unload his frustrations onto someone else. The Guide laughs, finding it amusing how pathetically self-centered this individual is, but still he agrees to help, as he has been working on a magic stone for some time, and this might be the perfect opportunity to put it to use. We then return to the present, where that golem is wrecking the slum, leaving the population in panic as people flee for their lives. Unable to contain her curiosity, Carmilla appears beside Xenos, questioning how such an ancient relic could be causing so much damage there, while Xenos just asks for Lily, and Carmilla explains that she is sleeping. At that instant, the three faction leaders arrive, having heard the chaos that was unfolding. We see that although they escaped unharmed, many of Linga's werewolves are injured and unable to move, and besides them, almost half of Lova's orcs are seriously wounded. Our protagonist informs them that what they are facing is probably an ancient life form from the surface, and the point in question is, where did this contraption come from? Lova isn't sure, but one of her orcs says they saw the monster emerge from inside the slum, and Xenos immediately puts two and two together and reaches the obvious conclusion that the underground guild is involved up to their necks. With that, he orders the three leaders to gather the wounded in one place so he can perform a massive healing process, promising that the one responsible for this will pay, and it won't be cheap. Elsewhere, positioned behind the front lines and observing through a monocular, the guide watches the mess unfold, and he realizes that the golem is as destructive as he expected, though perhaps a bit slow, thinking there's room for improvement, but at least it's sufficient for the job. He wonders how Xenos will react when those who admire him start to kick the bucket. After all, this is just the first act, and the guide couldn't be more excited to see how it will play out. Back in the chaos, everyone who still has two legs runs to help the wounded, and thanks to the alliance between the three rival gangs, everyone in critical condition is taken to a central point where our protagonist can use greater healing and recover them all at once. Having done that, he orders all the healed to evacuate immediately, while Carmilla raises an eyebrow, questioning why he's so grumpy, while he grumbles that it's not exactly ideal to be woken up in the middle of the night to save hundreds of lives without getting paid for it. But one thing is for sure, he makes it clear that his work won't be for free, as the defeat of the scoundrel who is doing this will be his payment. The scene shifts perspective, and we see that the guide continues to observe and appears surprised, as Xenos, he says, might be even more skilled than an elite, but still, he questions what's the point of healing all those people if, at the end of the day, the golem is casually wandering around. Declaring next that he acknowledges that the healer won the first act and now it's time to prepare for the second. For now, with no more wounded to treat, and the golem taking a brief pause, the defenders have a moment to breathe, especially Xenos, who looks exhausted and would prefer to be snoring away. However, since the monster is still wandering around, it means the mess still has no end in sight whether Xenos likes it or not. The Spectre reminds him that there's no chance the golem will simply give up, as these things follow their master's orders until the job is done, and based on how it's moving, she bets the command was something like, demolish the neighborhood until nothing is left. And Xenos hearing that just shows he's exhausted and overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Carmilla ponders how anyone even managed to get their hands on a high-purity magic stone, the type used as a golem's core, because as far as is known, these stones only exist on the southern continent. In the ruins of the Demon Lord's castle, besides the fact that all these stones were supposedly used during the war between humans and demons, and the knowledge to create dark magic systems was lost ages ago. Xenos says he doesn't want to work on what-if scenarios anymore because he's too tired and wants to resolve this thing once and for all, then stands up to go after the enemy. Zofia, Linga, and Love offer to fight by his side as it is their home that is being destroyed. Carmilla then explains that to take down the golem they will have to destroy the magic stone hidden somewhere inside its body, as that is like the monster's heart, saying that if they don't, it will regenerate. Xenos just sighs, as this means they won't be able to somehow capture the stone and sell it, but oh well, that's life. He then tells the others to initiate the attack while he stays in the rear providing support. They then advance and receive buffs increasing speed, strength, and impact, and with that their attacks become fast and precise. During the exchange, the golem takes a hit but recovers almost instantly and counters the blow on Linga, making her fly, but she is fine thanks to our protagonist's powerful reinforcement spells. Speaking of Xenos, now it's his turn to act, thinking it's been a long time since he participated in a battle like this, so he needs to focus on two important things. First, the further away he is, the less effective his spells become, so he needs to maintain a certain distance to maintain his potency. Second, although healing, defense, and buffs may seem similar, each activates differently, so he can't simply cast them all at once. Zenos has to protect his allies until they are ready to attack, then boost their abilities and only then heal any injuries they may have suffered in the process. When the golem regenerates once more after taking damage, Zenos thinks he knows what to do, as he realized it takes some time for the monster to recover any lost body parts, so he tells his teammates to attack its legs, and as they do, the creature begins to collapse. But as it's falling, Zofia notices a child standing directly below, about to be crushed. Zenos runs towards the girl, but there's no time to save her, yet somehow, the golem adjusts its fall enough to avoid hitting her, sparing her life. Seeing this from afar, the guide admits that this enemy is full of surprises and declares that Zenos won the second act too, but what comes next is the beginning of the third and most important, as it is where the outcome of this mess lies, and a supposed final decision awaits our protagonist. Back to the heroes, Carmilla mentions that golems should only follow simple commands and shouldn't be capable of what this one just did. And Zenos suspects that someone used an imperfect magic stone on it, especially since the healer just scanned the golem's remains and discovered that that jerk Aston is inside it. We then have another flashback where this scumbag had gone to see the guide to seek his revenge no matter the cost. And then the guide narrates that Zenos probably realized that Aston is inside because, according to him, the best way to bring an imperfect magic stone to life is to combine it with a living human. And the fusion between the stone and a person creates a new type of core. However, this fusion is prone to errors, as humans, with their complex emotions, are difficult to control. So to get as close as possible to success, it's necessary to involve someone who is filled to the brim with resentment and hatred, because that way he wouldn't back down. And this brings the situation to the point the guide was eager to reach, as he wants to see how Zenos will proceed with this fight, because it's a fact that destroying a simple gigantic stone can have weight, but destroying a stone with an X-group member inside who may not look like it, but is a human being is another, and according to the guide, if one falls, both fall. Zenos takes a deep breath and tells the girls to fall back as he has to deal with this alone now. They protest, saying that a healer like him can't go to the front lines alone, and he agrees that would be the smart decision, especially since avoiding the front lines was the 7th lesson his mentor always taught him, given that if you're too busy fighting, you lose focus on supporting your allies. But considering the current situation, he decides it's something he needs to resolve alone. Like the leaders, Carmilla realizes it's almost dawn and decides to go home too, as she's not much of a fan of the sun. Still, she promises to have tea ready when he returns, while Zenos jokes, saying she'll simply leave the task of making tea to Lily, and the Spectre admits he outsmarted her. Now alone facing his rival, Zenos remembers when Aston came to him in this very place and that it was here where it all began. Putting that aside, it was shocking to see someone as selfish as him save a child. Zenos once heard Guile say that the reason Aston craved money and power was because his younger sister had died without being able to afford treatment. And scriptwriter, don't even try to humanize this guy, let me hate him in peace. Zenos says that perhaps that child reminded him of her and that in the end there might still be a trace of humanity in that golem. Our protagonist mentions that he always wondered how Aston knew back then that he had no place to return to, but today he recognizes that it's because Aston didn't either, so in the end, they weren't so different. However, none of that matters now. Dodging a golem's blow, Zenos uses his magic scalpel to cut off the creature's arms and hit its chest, piercing deep enough to open a hole in its core. With that, Aston is fully exposed and Zenos doesn't rejoice in it, but at least this will be the last time they have to face each other. Without hesitation, the healer opens the man's chest with his scalpel and declares that it's time for their adventure to end. The guide, watching intently, is surprised to see that Zenos killed his ex-colleague with much less hesitation than expected, and I seriously doubt that. He'll still save Aston, just watch. The guide continues reflecting and thinks that given the apparent abuse he suffered at the hands of that lunatic, perhaps it wasn't an irrational decision on his part. In any case, he acknowledges that the game is over and that it wasn't as exciting as he expected. Still, the guide continues looking through the telescope and realizes that the story isn't over yet, and this was so obvious it was screaming. Instead of just injuring his old ally, Zenos is healing him with each blow, cutting off the parts fused with the magic stone and healing what remains, because he knows that if he cuts too deep, Aston will succumb. However, if he hesitates for too long, the magic stone will fuse again with the newly healed body. Admiringly, the guide observes that the healer still maintains such focus and precision, even after saving so many people in the middle of a brutal battle. And Zenos, in turn, knows that the world would probably be better without this guy. But since he made the choice to let him live, the least the bastard can do is pay the treatment bill, especially now that Zenos is broke. Aston then asks why he was spared, and the healer gives him a few reasons. First, before dying, he would need to reveal who was truly behind all this. Second, despite being an absolute piece of trash, he did some things that ended up benefiting Zenos' life, mentioning that he took him out of the slums and then gave him compensation, albeit out of arrogance, and that seemingly worthless compensation was precisely the resource he had to save Lily and start his clandestine clinic. However, the biggest reason is the fact that he is a healer, and his mission is to save lives, not take them. With that, he plunges his scalpel into the golem's chest, hitting the magic core, and instantly a blinding ray of light shoots out of the creature's body. After being saved, Aston, visibly embarrassed, admits that Zenos is an amazing guy because even after everything, he still chose to let him live. At that, he asks if this is his revenge, but Zenos replies that he never thought that far ahead as he just acted on instinct. With that, Aston reflects on a life spent using others and finally recognizes all the evil he caused. And bowing his head, he begs Zenos for forgiveness. Not that he believes it will change anything. Zenos tells him to stop the sob story because now that he's healed, it's time to face the consequences of his own actions. And with that, Zenos amplifies the strength of his arm tenfold and declares one more reason to spare this guy. He wouldn't feel good about punching someone unconscious. And having said that, Zenos pummeled the guy's face with gusto because what Zenos went through at this nutjob's hands was no small thing, and a lame apology wouldn't be enough. After the beating, Aston ends up naked in the gutter and is woken up by Krishna, who reports that it's the second time she's come to the poor neighborhoods with reports of monster attacks, and it's also the second time she's bumped into him. Putting that aside, Zenos explained everything to her and that it's a true miracle that no one kicked the bucket in a cataclysm like what happened there, and that alone will leave him indebted to Zenos for the rest of his life. Still, despite the happy ending, Aston is arrested for attempted assault, prison escape, perjury, revenge, and damage to personal property, besides public indecency for obvious reasons. Krishna then delivers a message from Zenos which says that he took his sword while he was unconscious, as it's a top-tier item from an underground labyrinth, so it will fetch him some change to cover at least some of the damage he caused, and since he was the one who found it, it's only fair that he return it. Aston laments that there's nothing left to lose at this point, but Krishna mentions one more thing, saying that he gave him an ironic gold coin, saying that this is for cutting ties once and for all, and that he never wants anything to do with Aston again, and the guy, completely broken, starts to cry. The scene changes, and we see that Zenos is with the leaders, and he just says he's exhausted as hell. The girls offer to help him, but he insists they take care of themselves, as they must also be worn out. Even so, they insist on carrying him, as he's always the one who takes care of them, so it's time to return the favor. The scene changes once more, and somewhere in the middle of all this, the guide decides to disappear for a while, mentioning that at some point Zenos will cross his path again, and when that moment comes, they will play again. When Zenos finally returns home, Carmilla teases him, saying that she hoped he had died so she could have a few days of peace again. But Lily gives her away, saying that in reality, Carmilla was oozing worry. As for the elf, she never doubted for a second, mentioning that she even prepared tea, calmly waiting for her master's return, because she knew he would come back.